Thank you, Millie Edwards. You know, musicians begin practicing their trade at a very early age, and they practice and they practice. Millie probably has thousands of hours practicing. And I don't know how many times she's done that song, but it's been over and over and over. And then she gets it just right, and the audience, after all those painstaking hours of practice, give her the highest recognition possible, a standing ovation. It's the same thing with orators in putting together their speech. They craft together a message, choosing words very, very precisely. They write it all out several times over. And they practice it and practice it and practice it, and they get up and they deliver it. And at times it reaches that point of perfection where all those hours pay off and the orator gets a standing ovation. Other people like Geneva Price just show up, and her very presence evokes a standing ovation. Isn't it good to see her back? For those of you who are new here, don't know her, she is our cantor, and she opens the service with the call to worship, has for 25 years, and just a very lovely person, but has had a knee replacement and an ankle problem as of late, so she's not been able to be with us. This is her first time back. And Debbie Eisler, is that you? Yeah. My gosh, good to see you here. When was it I married you and your husband, Steve? Yeah. When? 12 years ago. Good. How are you? I'm good. Yes, yeah, I'm doing fine. Thanks for asking. Also, I'd like to say hi to Lori from Alberta, Edmonton, Canada. And she joins with us in these services via the internet or DVD. And so, Lori, our love and our blessings go out to you. May peace be with you. And spread the light and the joy in Canada, or wherever you're at. It's good to have you with us. The lesson today is titled, Compassion Blossoms Forth from Understanding. And quite simply what that means is every time we're irritated, every time we're agitated, every time we're angry or upset, it's usually a result of something that we don't understand, especially when it comes to other people. The lotus flower is a perfect metaphor for our relationships. Imagine a silty, murky, mucky, dirty waters in a swamp-like body of water. And at the very base, a tiny root takes place, and a stem emerges, and it works its way up through the murky waters, struggling as it goes. When it reaches the top, the bud opens up into this brilliant green leaf that floats on top of the water. And in the middle of the leaf, a flower emerges that is pristine, pure, brilliantly white. It's the lotus flower, and there's absolutely no sign of the muck or the mire from which it came. It's just this pure expression that came forth from the swampland. Well, our relationships are very much like that. You know, sometimes they aren't easy. Sometimes we get drawn into the muck and the mire and the muddy bottom of darkness, problems with other people. But the lotus flower is a metaphor that we have the ability within us, we have the compassion within us to rise above, move beyond the surface, and allow the flower within us to shine bright with compassion. And compassion is a difficult thing because we're called on to respond to somebody with sensitivity who's being insensitive to us. We're called on to respond to somebody with kindness who's being unkind to us. We're called on to respond to somebody with goodness and with an open heart who's not being good to us. It's very, very difficult. There's two different kinds of compassion. One is allowing ourselves to move into somebody's suffering and do what we can to make it better. Somebody that's in a distressful condition, somebody that has been knocked down by life, somebody that is facing conditions that just aren't comfortable. And we willingly move into that suffering with them and help rise them up a little bit, help them ease the discomfort. The other kind of compassion is for those people who, for one reason or another, just don't seem to be able to express kindness, love, appreciation, or respect. Something has happened along the way that has wounded them emotionally, so to speak. And that's the most difficult kind of compassion, because we're called forth to respond to negativity with a sense of positiveness. We're called on to respond to hatred with love, to respond to conflict with peace, to respond to obstinance with understanding. Now, each and every one of us in this room has the ability to be obstinate, obnoxious, disrespectful, belligerent, arrogant, even repulsive. We all have that ability, as every human being does, and at times, speaking for myself, I've expressed each and every one of those negative characteristics. Now, it's important when it comes to other people that we understand there's some reason why they are the way they are. You know, some people are all of the things I just mentioned because of the home environment that they were raised in, because of characteristics the parents might have had, because of situations or circumstances they endured while growing up. There's a reason why they are the way they are, and when we understand that, whether we understand the reason or not, but when we understand that there's a reason why they are the way they are, it allows us to step back, not take it personally, and serve in a way where we can be compassionate to them and help lighten their load just a little bit. Now, every week, I come up here and I tell you, your life began at one point in time. That was the beginning. Your life will complete itself at one point in time. That will be the end. Between the beginning and the end, there is time. It's called your lifetime, and you get to choose how you're going to spend that time. Now, you might be confined. You might be saddled with a situation or circumstance that's not easy. You might be confronted with problems and challenges at the time, but you still have the choice of how you're going to experience that, how you're going to respond to whatever's going on in your life. The fact is that 85% of all of our time is spent in relationship with other people. 85%. Now, the result of that, it's important that those relationships, which are 85% of who we are, 85% of our earthly experience, that they are peaceful and that they're rewarding and they are fulfilling. But the fact of the matter is also that some of the relationships just aren't cordial. They aren't easy. And when it's the other person that's making that uneasiness, it's easy for us to step back, to reject, to move beyond, and go about our own way, or subject ourselves to an ill feeling that continues. Oftentimes there's people in families that just don't know how to respond to other people with kindness or with love. It's our duty to be compassionate to them. Know that it's not our fault, but we are there to help lift them up just a little bit, to just ease their suffering. And it's understanding that allows us to do that. Understanding literally means that which stands under, or the meaning or the reason for why something or somebody is the way it is. Why are some people the way they are? Our understanding of that allows us to rise above, just like the lotus flower, out of the murky swamp, rise above the waters, open up with a sense of compassion that brings light to a place of darkness. People are on an airplane. It takes off. They're 10,000 feet in the air, and all of a sudden a baby starts crying, screeching cries. After 10, 15 minutes, everybody starts to get a little bit anxious, a little bit upset, and they start mumbling under their breath, "Shut that kid up. I cannot take it." One person even suggests that the mother take the kid outside for some fresh air. We've all been in those situations or circumstances, but you know, every time a baby cries, it's because the baby needs something. It's in some state of discomfort. So on the airplane, the airline attendants come by and says, "The baby has an ear infection." And the pressurization of the plane has made it worse. The baby's in horrific pain. And immediately everybody understands. They move from complaint and rejection to acceptance and compassion because they know, they understand what it would be like if they were that baby? What would it be like if they had the ear infection and they were throbbing with pain? They understand. Understanding is the foundation from which compassion rises up out of. It's understanding. Understanding is everything. Now, Jesus' ministry was one of total understanding. He understood, first of all, himself, who he was, and he is very firm and strong in his presence, but he also understood other people's position. He could identify with them. He would go into the leper colonies, and he'd sit with these people that were horribly diseased and disfigured. Just the most horrific conditions that you can think of. And he'd go in there, and he'd sit with them, and he'd hold their hands, and he'd look in their eyes. And he would ease their suffering simply by his presence of expressing love to them rather than rejection. In another situation, he came into a small town, and there's a large group of people that had gathered around a single woman. And they were hollering at her and screaming at her and calling her a sinner. Jesus came on the scene, and he asked the people to calm down a little bit. And they said, "Do you know what this woman has done? She has sinned." And Jesus said, "Yes, I know." And they said, "Do you know what religious law is in regards to this sin? It's to stone her to death." And Jesus said, "Yes, I know." And they said, "Okay, let's stone her to death. But let the one who's never sinned be the one who casts the first stone." And immediately they all realized that at some point in their life they had sinned, they'd made a mistake, they had screwed up somehow, and perhaps the woman was no different than them. So they quickly dispersed and they went on their way. It's compassion. It's to move into somebody's suffering and not get caught up in it. Now, another thing that was very important in that story was that Jesus told the woman, "I forgive you." But then he said, "Go and sin no more." See, he didn't excuse her sin. He didn't make light of it. He didn't say, "Oh, that's okay, don't worry about it." He admitted that it was wrong. He didn't excuse it, but he forgave it. And there's a big difference there. You can stand in the face of all sorts of disrespect, all sorts of anger pointed at you. Some people, their words and their actions, they come out like stinging arrows just out of nowhere without warning. And you are the target that those stinging arrows land on. You can stand in the face of all sorts of animosity, and you can forgive it. But it's also okay to say, "I forgive you, but I will not be subjected to this again. Don't do this to me." Help them learn the effect that it has on you. Through compassion, you engage in that way. Several years ago, we had a homeless person that came by the church quite frequently. His name was Stephen McGuire. Some of you may remember him. A young man, about 24, 25 years old. Every time he came by the church, he was intoxicated. And when he came into the church, he would get loud, he'd get boisterous, he'd get obnoxious. Sometimes he would yell, shout out obscenities and profanities. And more often than not, we had to grab him by the arms and push him out the door and tell him not to come back. Well, one Sunday, I was up here giving a talk just like I am now, and lo and behold, the back door is open, and there's Stephen McGuire. And he comes staggering down the aisle. It's quite obvious that he's drunk. Closer and closer. And I'm thinking, okay, take a seat, Stephen. And he doesn't, and it's one of those situations where your mind just goes blank. It's like, I don't know what's happening. I don't know what's going to happen. I don't know what to do. He got to the steps, stumbled up them, came right here to the middle of the stage, fell to his knees, held up his arms to the love window as if he was reaching out for Jesus to save him. And then he fell over and passed out. There's a nurse in the audience that ran forward, checked him out physically. He was fine. He was just drunk and passed out. So we helped him into a chair, took him into the back room. When he sobered up, off he went.